So, hi everybody, I'm Callie, your big sister MD, and today I'm joined by
Hi, my name is Arvind. I'm a IMT2 doctor in Cambridge.
amazing. So, today we're going to talk to Arvind about all sorts of questions that you guys have sent me about what it's like to work as a doctor in the UK, his personal experience, his journey to medicine, stuff like that. So, if you're ready, we'll get started. So, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself? Where are you from originally? Where did you go to medical school? Let's start with that.
So I was born in the UK, but my parents are originally South Indian, Tamil. So they came here, so I am second generation. Um, so I did most of my growing up in a place called Bedford, which is around 45 minutes away from Cambridge in the UK. I went to university in Cambridge for 6 years. I graduated in 2020, literally at the beginning of COVID. And then I've been a doctor since then. And I've spent my 4 years so far in the same region.
And so you said that you went to Cambridge for 6 years. So can you talk to us a little bit about like your path to medicine? Because I know that in the UK you can have like a 4 year, 5 year, or 6 year path
So,
to medicine. So like, did you have any previous degrees, or did you just go straight into medical school? Talk to us a little bit about that.
yeah, so in the UK, you finish school at year 13. And then I didn't do a gap year. So I went straight into university. I didn't have any other degrees. So I went from school to uni. And some medical courses are 5 years. Uh, that's undergraduate degrees without a BSc or a BA degree that's intercalated. Whereas some do have that intercalated degree, and then it makes it 6 years. So for my intercalated BSc or BA, as they call it in Cambridge, I did pharmacology alongside medicine. So that's what made it 6 years. But sometimes you'll see 4 year courses, and that's for the graduate medics. So if you've done a degree before, um, those who are graduates can apply for undergraduate degrees, but then you're spending longer in university. So most go for the 4 year medical degree.
Okay, and so when did you do pharmacology? Did you do it like before you did medicine, or did you do medicine and then pharmacology? Like, how
Yeah.
does that work?
So in Cambridge, you do year 1 and 2, that's of medicine. And then your third year is the BA year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool. As somebody that really struggled with pharmacology, I'm like a little bit shocked that you loved it so much you chose to study it.
Yeah.
So can you talk to us a little bit about some advice that you would give to pre-medical students who are considering a career in medicine?
Hmm. So I'm aware that I'd be talking to kind of a worldwide audience.
Yeah.
So first, I would think about where I'd want to study and work. So obviously, my experience is in the UK, but I have friends who have done the same in other countries. But on the whole, I think you'd need to have some sort of liking to basic sciences, biology and chemistry, not physics. You don't care about physics. But biology and chemistry, you probably need to like it to a certain extent. But you, I advise you to always have the future in mind and what kind of career you want to do. You'll realize that a lot of um, career pathways rely on you having evidence of interest and building up a portfolio. So the earlier you know, it doesn't have to be one exact career. You can have two, three interests, but always have kind of overlapping portfolio evidence or research or quality improvement projects or audits, things that you can put into each of those applications, but you have only done one of those. So just maximize the efficiency of things you're doing. Um, and then I would have to say, you then have to think about what country you'd want to work in. I think for students, it's all the same. It'll be fun, regardless of what country you go to. And to be honest, regardless of which university you go to. But then you really need to think about where you want to work. And it's hard the stage of school to think that far ahead. Um, I probably never had to think about that really. For me, it was kind of UK from the beginning. Um, but let's say you were coming in from France or Germany or India, you'd want to think about, oh, is UK the place to live? Or do I want to go to the US? And what are the barriers for me to get there? And what would life like? What would life look like there? Bringing up family. Um, what are the people like there? Will I be happy in that environment? So things like that. There's a lot to consider.
Could you talk about some study strategies or techniques that you have that have like worked well for you in medical school? And are they the same that you use now for those written exams and practical exams, or have you changed the way that you study? Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, at university, depending on which uni you go to, I think everyone found it hard going into Cambridge. Uh, Not just multiple choice question exams, but you had essays, and those were the hardest. The way you kind of assimilate information from lectures and case based discussions, I would just go over all the material they gave us, kind of PDFs, PowerPoints, pick out keywords. And for me, is if I knew the basic concept, that meant I could work out any question from first principles. So rather than learn every single scenario, if I knew the first principles, I could work out every single scenario. And specifically for single best answers or multiple choice questions, I learned the most by doing those kind of MCQs. And at med school, past medicine is like it's an MCQ bank online, which is the cheapest one online. And I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but I found them very useful for med school. But for postgraduate exams, I then went to another one called Pass Test, which is more expensive, but you can afford it then because you're working. So yeah, for me, it was the more material you see and are exposed to, the more questions you answer, the more you learn. I have friends who are obsessed with Anki, and that's based on kind of the evidence which exists, which supports active recall. Yeah, I admit active recall is the way you learn things. For me, I was lucky. I have a very good memory, so I had to rely less on the active recall techniques. But
So you focus more on like doing practical questions, like exam questions, and then kind of grading them or revising them and deciding like, okay, I missed this question because this X, Y, and Z, and so let me study that kind of
yeah,
situation.
yeah. So if I give you a very medical example, there are loads of causes for hypercalcemia. Um, but if I get that wrong, there's always a reason in the question which is pointing to the right answer. And if I got it wrong, then I would remember for next time. Um, and I would do all the endocrinology questions if I'm learning endocrinology one day. And I would then do all the ones I got wrong another day until I could do every question. Yeah.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. That's a good way to do it.
Yeah, and I realized at university that I wasted a lot of time doing note taking and note making. So eventually I stopped that after first year. And so I just relied on the university's notes. If they didn't give me notes, I didn't really care. Then I would just go to kind of very easy to digest books. So not like Kumar and Clark. I can't read that. It's too small. Um, but there's like Oxford Handbook cases for medicine and surgery. It's like a red and white book. That was a very good book. Reading via cases as opposed to just conditions really helps associate facts to a certain kind of diagnosis. So it's very hard to learn all the facts about Wilson's disease. But if you were taken through, oh, this is the history of a patient, what things are you thinking of? What investigations would you consider? What's your differential diagnosis? And then it gives you the background of Wilson's disease. So that's the best way of learning for me.
How do you prioritize your self-care and mental health with a demanding schedule of medical residency? And what sort of like strategies do you employ to keep a healthy balance and to protect your own mental health?
Yeah. Uh, I always leave on time. I always make it a point to leave on time. There's only a very rare circumstance when I don't, and that's when I'm trying to save someone's life. So when someone's arresting, obviously I'm not going to leave. But I think when you're just starting out, you don't really know what you can hand over to your on-call colleague and what you can't. And it does depend on how much of a friend you are with that person. So there were plenty of times when I was an F1 who was on call, but I was friends with my colleagues and I would let them go home half an hour, 1 hour early, and they would just tell me what needs to be chased. So to give you an example, blood tests take 2, 3 hours to process. If they were only sent at 4 o'clock, but that's the only job that's remaining, and on call, their normal day shift finished at 5:30. I'm not going to make that person wait 1.5 hours just so they're going to say, "Oh, please, can you chase those blood tests?" As long as I'm comfortable that there's no unwell patients who can suddenly deteriorate, that my colleagues are essentially free to go. I don't see the point of everyone staying unless you're just having banter on the ward and actually having fun for once. So, um, yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what it was like as a foundation year 1 and 2, and now what it's like as an internal medicine trainee?
Yeah. So foundation one and two, well, foundation one, you're treated like a secretary, I have to say. You're always on ward round. You're either typing up the ward round note of a senior who's dictating it to you, or you're writing it down in hospitals which aren't lucky to have an electronic system. Um, F2, you're kind of treated the same, but you're given a bit more responsibility. But most of the time, you're treated the same as an F1. IMT, it's a relatively new thing, but I take it as more of a rebranding of CMT, core medical training. I think they've just rebranded it to hide the service provision that it is rather than training. But that's a whole different topic and more political. Um, yeah, so IMTs are treated a bit different. They're able to be trusted to review patients by themselves if they're unwell. They're given more responsibilities on the acute take or taking patients from ED into medicine and reviewing them for admission. And especially if you're past paces and you have MRCP, then you're treated much more like a senior. So for me, I'm past my exams, so I'm getting treated more of a senior now. And to be honest, I hold myself together as more of a senior as well.
That's great. And could you just kind of, for the people that don't know how the UK system works, could you just talk a little bit about kind of the flow chart after medical school? So starting in foundation year 1, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, so everyone does foundation one and foundation two. And that is the first, after foundation two, that is the first bottleneck of applications. The one route is called run through. So some specialties, you can go straight into what's called specialty training year one or ST1. That includes neurosurgery, psychiatry, histopathology, radiology, uh, GP, to name a few. But other specialties are gatekept by core medical training and core surgical training. I mean, core medical training is now called internal medicine training. So for those specialties, you have to do 2 more years of this core training, and then you reach another bottleneck of specialty training year 3 applications, because those 2 core years are treated as ST1 and ST2 for those non-run-through training programs. So for example, if I wanted to do cardiology, I'll do F1, F2, I apply for IMT training. I have to do 3 years of IMT before I can get to ST4 cardiology applications. Right now, I've applied for dermatology. So I went through F1, F2. I applied for IMT. But for dermatology, I don't need to do 3 years. I only need to do 2 years of IMT. And then I apply for ST3 dermatology. So specialties that are like cardiology, where you have to do 3 years of IMT and go for ST4 training, they're called Group 1 specialties. So that includes cardiology, gastroenterology, respiratory medicine, kind of the big dogs in medicine. Whereas Group 2 specialties, you only have to do 2 IMT years. So those include dermatology, medical ophthalmology, and there's a whole list online. If you look at the physician recruitment for high specialty training webpage, it tells you which ones are Group 1, which ones are Group 2. And then for surgical training, that, since I'm not a surgeon, I know less about, but they do 1 and 2 core surgical training, CST, and then they apply for SD3 surgery training.
Okay, and can you talk to us about a little bit how the responsibilities have changed as you've gone from F1, F2? So you said the F1 and F2 is very much like secretary type of thing where you're doing a lot of note taking, not a lot of patient contact. So can you talk to us about how your responsibilities have changed over the past 3 years as a doctor?
Yeah, so I mean, I would have patient contact in F1 and F2, but I would say in a more junior capacity. Um, I wouldn't be leading ward rounds as such, unless you're in a tiny district general hospital. Um, so, for example, I did a lot of my training in a tertiary hospital, which is also a hospital linked to a university. So there's a lot of training happening, and uh, a lot of supervision as well. So in my experience as an F1, F2, you're in charge of all the jobs on the ward. So ordering scans, making sure you convince the radiologist to do these scans, ordering blood tests, chasing those blood tests, writing discharge summaries, calling patient families, things like that. After that, the more senior you get, the more responsibility goes towards you assessing unwell patients. And also, you'll be trusted to do your own ward round. So, let's say a ward has 30 patients. You'd hope you have someone else helping you. So, you'd have 2 doctors splitting that ward into 2. Sometimes your senior is annoying and wants like a secretary to type for them, in which case you're seeing all 30 patients, which I find inefficient, to be honest. And I'm now senior enough to tell my seniors I'm not going to type for them, especially if I don't like them. But if I do like them, then I don't mind. But I'm very quick on ward rounds. And especially with an electronic system. So what I recommend is trying to get into the hospital with an electronic system. And the hospital I'm at has the best electronic system that I know of.
And that goes with my next question. So I was going to say, do you feel like you've been prepared well for the responsibilities that you have now? Like, do you feel like you've been trained enough and the education has prepared you for the increasing amount of responsibility throughout the years?
No. And the thing is, I think most doctors would vouch for this, that training is secondary to service provision. That's the issue in the UK. A lot of training is sacrificed. Let's say I have teaching, um, and if patients were needing to be seen or a consultant needed a secretary to type, then we would have to stay behind Mr. Teaching. That is improving as such, as the younger doctors are getting into more the educational senior roles. Um, so they're more understanding that we need the training that we signed up for. Um, but yeah, I probably wasn't prepared, but I kind of like learning on the job anyway. It gives me more freedom. Uh, I do like chasing up for what I'm owed, though. So if I haven't got this training, I will make sure I get it, or I'll make up for it. Yeah.
That's right. That's you really have to be your own advocate because especially
Yeah,
with medicine, if you don't, you can miss out on so many opportunities.
exactly. And I think from school to uni to work, the person who's going to get you through life is yourself, primarily. So you need to look out for yourself. And I I would also join the if you come to the UK, join the BMA or wherever you go, join a sort of union um, who advocates for doctors' rights
So what does
because
the BMA stand for? The British Medical
association,
Association.
British Medical Association, yeah. But that's essentially the union that doctors join if they want to. It's not compulsory, but they have helped, and they're the ones who are leading the pay campaign right now.
And for any international students that are listening, if you're interested in doing your residency in the UK, you're probably going to enter as an FY2, like a foundation year two
Mm.
medic. So I know that that's not your experience, but as somebody who's been through foundation year two, what can you talk to us about kind of what you think it would be like to enter as an F year two, or like the difficulty passing from medical school straight into foundation year two?
Yeah, I think the first thing is kind of getting used to the UK population, the NHS, how things work here. Um, you might be shocked that things are inefficient, but that doesn't really come as a surprise to me. Um, you might be treated differently by our patient cohort because you're not British as such. Um, that's either directly or indirectly. You might just feel it, or you might just literally see it. Um, what else? I think medicine wise, I don't like you would have studied everything at university. It's no different medicine wise. And a lot of hospitals have guidelines. So if you're ever stuck, just look at the hospital guideline and no one can ever fault you because you have followed that guideline. As an F2 standalone, you will be in training. So you are a trainee, you should be treated as a trainee. You should have all your educational opportunities. Just get all your portfolio sign offs early on because then you can just relax for the rest of the year, really. I, I, I don't think you'd have an issue with the medicine side of things. It's more everything else, kind of life in the UK, people you speak to. I mean, obviously, you're coming from a different country, so where are your friends? Who will you make friends? Where will you live? Setting up all of that. Um, and then, I don't know, it will probably put a strain on your relationships if you have them before you come to the UK, especially because there's this visa issue now where your visa doesn't extend to your family. So you need to be a working professional to come into the UK, etc.
And can you explain to those of us who don't know what a foundation year standalone is, like an F2 standalone? What does that mean?
Yeah, so the norm here is for a British person leaving university, they'll get into F1, but they need to complete F1 before they get full registration with the GMC. But those who have studied, especially in the European countries or anywhere that can prove that they have full registration in their local country, they can apply for an F2 standalone because people who apply for that they already have full registration in their home country, and then when they apply during the application process, they just apply for a formal full registration with the GMC without doing any time. It's just like a conversion of their full registration. So standalone means you're not doing F1, you're only doing F2, but that doesn't prevent you from applying for higher specialty training. It's all the same. You'll be treated as the same as any other F2.
And I got a question. What is the difference between an F2 standalone and a non-training? Do you know what non-training is?
Yeah, there's loads of non-training jobs, and they're often called fellows. They're
Okay.
called clinical fellows, or trust grade doctors. The terms change here and there. They only serve to confuse. But standalone F2 is a training program. So you're a trainee, you will have a training number, and you have specific educational requirements that need to be provided for you. Yeah.
And so a non-trainee, like a clinical fellow, are they also preparing for a higher specialty, or are they not? Like, what is it that they're?
If you think of it as like a gap year where this person, let's say, has finished F1, F2, but didn't get into higher specialty training, but they want a year still working, but to work on their portfolio. So they're still earning money, but have time to work on their portfolio. They might think, oh, wait, let me do a clinical fellow job in the specialty I want to do, but just out of training, build up experience so it looks good in applications.
Oh, okay.
So, for example, in dermatology, a lot of people don't get in the first time, and then they might apply for a fellow job in dermatology, which is out of training, but will give you a lot of experience in that year that you do it. You'll still do clinics, you'll still do surgeries, and that all serves to bump up your kind of portfolio.
Okay. So it's like a way to work in the hospital without continuing your higher education.
Exactly, exactly. You do kind of, there's this hidden um, difference in the way you're treated to trainees. Trainees always get the priority with kind of procedures or opportunities, educational opportunities, because they're in training. Um, but if you have a good relationship with trainees and fellows between each other, then you can like easily arrange time to do your own educational things as a fellow. So, for example, I was working in hepatology. We had a clinical fellow who was trying to get a, a CREST or a CSER, this certificate of equivalency. This is a whole different thing, but basically, he wanted educational opportunities for his portfolio. And I was happy that he can go do his clinics because I already done my clinics. I'm already managing the ward and I don't need him. So he's free to do that. So we were friends enough to do that arrangement.
That's good to know. And what sort of difficulties arose for you when you went from foundation year 2 to IMT? Like, do you want to talk about kind of the application process, how you don't know where you're going, all that kind of stuff?
Okay. So you apply for higher specialty training in the October-November period of F2. So very early in your F2, you're already applying for another specialty or higher training. You rank your location preference, but that is all determined by your end score, which is a combination of maybe an exam like the MSRA plus your interview score. So you have some level of control of how high a score you get, but still it's a lot of pressure and you don't really know where you're going to be. It's not you have your score and then you preference, because then everyone would preference the south of England because that's the nice area. It's near London. But so you actually never know your rank before you preference your locations, which is the annoying thing. So you need to think about, oh, how am I going to live there? Do I need to rent? Um, or am I going to be long distance with my relationship? It's like how it's going to affect that. That's a massive pain. Um, do I need a car, etc.? There's a lot of things to think about, and it's a lot of stress. Um, and it boils down to service provision. If people had more control, people would not be in some hospitals willingly.
To change subjects, you were talking a little bit about some resources that you have for doctors once they're practicing in the UK, but could you talk a little bit about, some resources that maybe you use on a daily basis as a doctor, and if somebody, especially coming into the UK, resources that you would recommend for them
Mhm.
as a doctor practicing in the UK?
Yeah, so if it's to do with exams, then as a post university doctor, I would use Pass Test. I'm not sponsored by them or anything. I would use Pass Test as the resource for MCQs. Um, as for resources for daily work, I would go to Up to Date, or it's an excellent resource for literally up to date guidelines for any sort of condition, um, and it's not UK specific either. So it brings worldwide evidence, assimilates it, and gives you the best information. Hospital guidelines are always kind of your go-to if you're stuck. If you want to do if you're actually interested in something, then go for Up to Date if it's free. BMJ Best Practice is another excellent resource that my hospital pays for. So my hospital pays for Up to Date and BMJ Best Practice. The BMJ Best Practice gives you treatment algorithms, typical histories, the workup for many conditions, ranging from sickle cell anemia to lupus, um, to cryoglobulinemia. So it's an excellent resource. For little things on the job, MD Calc is an app you can get on your phone. It has all the scoring systems that you need to be aware of, kind of little equations that you can put numbers into for creatinine clearance, EGFR, things like that. So that's one. And then each hospital has their own microbiology guidance because of regional differences in sensitivities of microorganisms. And that's through an app called MicroGuide. Um, other resources, I find YouTube extremely helpful. Um, there are sometimes when you're in one country, you only kind of focus in those countries' resources, but YouTube becomes worldwide, and there are excellent teachers worldwide who make videos on YouTube.
Do you have any specific like YouTube channels that you go to learn about different things?
I have to say, Osmosis is very good,
Mm.
and then what's his name? I think it's Khan Academy.
Mm.
Yeah, I think it's called Khan Academy. He's very good. Those two channels are very good.
This is a hot topic in the UK right now, especially during the junior doctor strikes, and especially because a lot of international students will do their residency in the UK for financial reasons.
Mhm.
So, keeping that in mind, how do you plan to manage your finances effectively during residency, considering the cost of living and potential financial constraints in the UK?
Mm. So I think this advice would count for any job you do in terms of finances. And I'll preface this by saying I'm not a financial advisor. If you want active financial advice, go to someone who's qualified. So as a doctor, there are a lot of expenditures that are related to work. For example, for me, I pay for the BMA, which is the union. That's around £240 right now. I have to pay a yearly GMC fee, which is around £160. Uh, I have to pay a medical protection kind of insurance fee, which is actually the cheapest out of all of them. It's £40 a year. Uh, Exams wise, I had to pay £657 for my MRCP exams. Yeah, and there's three of them,
Oh
so
my.
that's expensive. Um, and for one of those exams, there are big courses that are available, and often these courses cost 1,500 and above. So I had to pay for one of those. I pay one that costs 1,595. Um, and different regions subsidize different amounts. And my region only subsidizes £1,000 of that. So I still have to pay £600 out of pocket.
Do
Uh,
they like is the pay the same for all doctors in all of the UK, or do they pay like doctors in London more because the cost of living is greater?
so it's actually ridiculous. We had a conversation with our hospital earlier this week. So London has what's called the London waiting, and it's this small percentage that they get because they live in London, and London historically has higher prices, higher cost of living. But Cambridge is actually as expensive as London, as some of their boroughs in London, but they won't give Cambridge waiting. The reason is the only way for any other city to get weighted is if you prove the staff of that hospital all live in that city. But then you can see it's a roundabout argument because the staff aren't able to live in the city because it is too expensive. They all live in the surroundings, but then the government or HMRC or whatever will say, oh, look, all your staff live in the surroundings. So why do you need the waiting? Well, we need the waiting because it's too expensive to live in the city. So they've had this roundabout argument for 30 years. And you
So
can,
only London gets paid an extra like
yeah,
supplement.
yeah,
Everyone else in the UK gets paid exactly the same,
yeah,
regardless of where they are.
yeah, yeah, it's silly. But to be fair, the London waiting's not good anyway. So,
Yeah, I mean, and do
yeah.
you get paid more like as a surgical trainee versus a medical trainee, or is it all like the same until you get to be a consultant?
So the pay structure is quite complex in the NHS. The basic pay that everyone gets is for 40 hours a week. And then people can earn more depending on how much on call hours they do, and how many weekends they do, and how many nights they do. And that's different from rotation to rotation. So one F1 can get more than another F1 if they do more on calls, more night shifts, more weekends.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and an F1 can earn more than an F2 because F2 is typically when you get GP rotations and psychiatry rotations, which are only 40-hour weeks with no additional hours, which means you're only taking home maybe £1,800 a month.
Really?
Yeah, after tax.
Wow. Because in Spain, the normal pay for a resident, like a year one resident, which would be the same as a foundation year one, is around like 1,600
Yeah,
euros.
yeah,
It's insane.
yeah. So it's not great, and hence why the pay campaign is happening. There are different nodal points, which means nodal points dictates what your hourly rate is.
What's a
So
nodal point?
it's just a term in the pay structure, which means at nodal point one, you are paid this amount per hour you work. Nodal point two, nodal point three, nodal point four, nodal point five, and then you become a consultant or something.
So is
And
it like each nodal point is for each year that you do trading, or is it
That's the thing. There isn't a separate nodal point for each year. Some nodal points combine years together. So for CMT, for 2 years of core training, they're the same nodal point, which means there's no rise in your hourly rate between CT1 and CT2. There is a rise between F2 and CT1, and there is a rise between F1 and F2. But there's no rise between ST3 and I think ST5. And they've only recently created a rise between ST5 and ST6,
Oh my
which
God.
didn't exist before.
And so going off of that, do you feel that the wage given, like in your past 3 years, do you feel like the wage that you've been given has been enough considering the junior doctor strikes? Like, have you been able to live off of it by yourself?
Oh yeah, you can live off it. It's not minimum wage. Like there are plenty of people who are worse off. I think the argument is, am I reimbursed for the level of work I do and what I provide to the society, the amount of education I've been through, the amount of fees I pay, and the the kind of abilities I have, which I can easily go to a corporate company for, but I didn't, and I serve the population for arguably a better cause. And am I reimbursed for that? No, I'm not. Absolutely not. And I think people fail to understand that. There's a lot about equality, things like that. Things aren't equal. You People have studied for a long time in medicine. They had to work the hardest at school. They had to work the hardest at uni. They're doing a very tough job. And for example, in F1, I was on nights and our hospital had a Costa. And I asked the Costa worker, what's your hourly rate? And his hourly rate was higher than mine. And I
What's a
just,
Costa?
Costa is a coffee shop chain.
Oh,
Yeah, so he was yeah,
the
you just,
barista is getting paid more than you?
yeah, in F1, his hourly rate was higher than mine. And I had just come from an arrest for which that patient survived. So then I was thinking, wow, this is how I am treated here. So it's you're not thanked enough, I think. And
I
then
mean,
there
to be
was
fair,
this whole,
I don't think that's a UK thing. I think that's like a global
yeah,
thing. You know, like
yeah,
in Spain, you're not getting paid as much as you should. In the United States, you graduate with hundreds of $1,000s worth of debt. You know, in the
yeah,
UK, it's just in general, it's a thankless job where you're going to be underappreciated and underpaid for a vast majority of your career.
yeah. And I always see it as you, any medic is capable of doing any other job, um, if they had gone into that education pathway, but they chose to do medicine. Whereas it's not vice versa,
Yeah.
and we're not treated as such.
Do you find that like your paycheck is enough so that you can pay all of your bills that you have to and then also save with
Mm,
all of the expenses that you have as far as like a $600 exam and paying for all like I mean that's insane. Like it,
yeah. So well, let's think about it. What if I take the example of the GP when I was on GP rotation? Things that are deducted from my salary is student loan, um, pension, and tax, income tax. So I'm left with £1,800 to work with a month. So rent, £1,000 gone. Let's say that includes bills if you're lucky. So I have £800 to work with. Let's say I fill up my car tank for, let's say, 5 times a month, and that's £70 a tank. That's £350 gone again. So that leaves £450. Um, let's say I do a big grocery shop every 2 weeks. That's, I don't know, let's say £75. So £150 in that month. That leaves me £300 left. So I have £300 left to work with, which isn't a lot. And I haven't accounted for fun. And I eat out a lot. I love food. Um, so it's not a lot.
Okay, good. So you do find that you can save even if it's a little bit, even after 3 years of medical training.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk about the relocations during each step of residency and the potential impact that can have? I mean, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but do you want to really like bring home the?
Yeah. So let's say I'll give you an example. So let's say I studied in Cambridge. I want to stay in Cambridge for foundation program. This current scenario, where it's random allocation, I'm scared. Oh wait, there's a good chance I might not stay in Cambridge. In which case, I'd want to stay um, in the same place for F1 and F2. So most rotations for F1 and F2 stay in the same region, but can't guarantee the same hospital. So then you're thinking, okay, is there a reasonable place where I can live in between this kind of region of hospitals? Is like, are there good transport links, trains, roads, buses, cycle? Um, so that's one thing to consider. And let's say, okay, I've got this F1, F2 job, I can settle for 2 years. But then within 1 year and 3 months, you're already applying for higher specialty training if you want to not take any breaks. And then that's, again, you're going through the same cycle. Oh, wait, I want to stay where I am because I've just moved here. I have a relationship now. Um, it gets even more complicated if they're a doctor as well, because they need to go through the same application process. We might be in different regions, and suddenly I'm in Birmingham for IMT training. My partner's in Liverpool for neurosurgical training, which is for 8 years. So now I'm thinking, oh crap, okay, how are we going to narrow this gap? So the first scenario is we want to make this work, so we narrow the gap. So the IMT person has to consider where they're going to apply for ST3 or ST4 training and whether they can get to Liverpool or whether those centers are even good for ST4 training. That's another issue. Uh, and then you get the sad pathway of, oh, wait, it's nothing wrong between us personally, but the distance and the circumstances make this relationship not viable. Uh, I've seen that happen as well. That's a very sad outcome. So I don't know. In a way, it does tear people apart.
So you have to relocate between medical school and foundation year, from foundation year to specialty training.
Yeah.
And then from specialty training, like core training to higher training as well. So there's like 3 bottlenecks that you're going to go
Yeah.
through.
So the maximum number of bottlenecks would be from med school to foundation, F2 to ST1 or CT1, then CT2 or 3 to ST3 or 4, and then when you become a consultant.
Wow.
So
So
what?
you're potentially relocating 4 times.
4 times, yeah. So that impacts whether you're going to buy a property. You're going to keep on renting through those 4 years if you don't stay in the same region. Um, so yeah, there's a bigger drive towards getting into a run-through program because then you can guarantee you're going to stay in the same region for 8 years or less.
And
Uh,
what is the like? When you're putting your ranking and stuff, how likely is it that you're going to get the first three top choices, for example?
That chance or probability varies at each stage. So between med school and foundation, that's where they argue that 79% of people get their top choice
Okay.
via this random allocation system. But compared to the old system where, let's say, you worked hard at uni, you were top, you had all the scores, you were right at the top, you had top rank, you deserve that top rank, you are going to get exactly where you want, 100%. That's a 100% probability compared to a 79% probability.
Yeah.
So that's that bottleneck. But for specialty and higher, you're in charge of maximizing your portfolio score. Then you're the one in charge of doing well in interview. So then after the med school foundation bottleneck, everything else is up to your efforts.
Okay. So you feel like there's a better probability of you going where you want to in the later bottleneck.
Yes, if you have done the work. Yeah. But a lot of specialties are competitive.
Yeah.
And so that will give you your own doubt of, oh, I've tried my best, but I still don't know if I'm going to get it.
Yeah.
So even though you worked hard, you're still left with this feeling of, oh, I don't know where I'm going to be next year.
Brutal.
Yeah.
And for our international listeners, would you recommend working in the UK as a resident? Why or why not?
Mm, good question. Um, so things you need to consider. I think I talked about it a bit before, but when you go to a different country, let's think about uh, living there, property, renting. I think your job will pay for rent. So then it's up to you how much you want to pay for rent. Because there'll be nice places, there'll be rubbish places. So that's fine. And that's something you'll encounter in any country you go to. Um, in terms of cost of living, yes, they are high compared to the minimum wage, but you'll be earning enough to be okay. You'll still have food on the table. So don't worry about that. Now, the work, kind of the amount of hours you work, UK is good in that sense because you get a lot of annual leave, study leave. You get 0 days after on-call periods. So you actually have a lot of time off in between work, even though the pay is low when you do work. So that makes up for it. So in terms of a work-life balance, UK, I think, gives that for you. US, they will work you to the bone.
Mm.
If you like that, go there. Australia, my impression is that if you haven't studied there and you go to work there, you'll be sent to the outback or you'll be in a non-training pathway. New Zealand is a bit better, but it's just far away from everything.
Yeah.
And Canada, they change their rules for Canada all the time, so don't quote me on this, but I think you can only go there if you have like a citizenship or visa. So it's very hard to get into.
And it's cold. We go to Canada.
Yeah. So UK is good for work-life balance. And if you're thinking even more long-term about kids and family, I think it's a nice place to raise your family. It's generally safe. Guns are not legal to carry when you compare it to some states in America. There's, uh, I'm not going to start quoting kind of numbers for crime because in case people get vexed about it, but I think from experience, uh, it's safer in the UK. School, the education system, I feel is more, it gives a better rounded experience for your kid. And I enjoyed my school experience here as well because I was in school here. So I think it would be great for kids, um, bringing them up, and also in terms of their own health and your own health, you'll have the NHS. I don't know how long the NHS will last for, but you'll have the NHS since you're paying taxes, and that gives you excellent care if you require it. Yeah. So I think overall, I would recommend coming to the UK currently. I think we'll see where the pay campaign takes us, but right now, I'm able to eat, I'm able to enjoy my life, I'm able to have a relationship, I'm able to look forward to my days off, and at times when I'm working as well. Um, I do feel burnt out sometimes, but I don't think I would feel as burnt out as I would be if I went to America.
Yeah.
Because I think the big choice is always between America or UK. Yes, as a consultant or attending in America, you earn hundreds of thousands of dollars. But think about all the money you have to pay back on your um, private insurance. Your private practice will have skyrocketing liability for getting sued. Um, the, the education system in America is broken, I think. Uh,
Horrible.
yeah, the whole system to get into university and then post-grad studies, it's all a bit strange there. The university funding is all messed up there. Safety-wise, it's not good. Political-wise, it's not stable. It's not looking good. Um, if you are convinced about money or going there for the short term, if you see yourself uh, wanting to just become an attending very as quick as possible and then come back to your home country, fine. I know of some people who do that. Bear in mind, a normal work week there is 6 days a week. Having a normal weekend is called a golden weekend because it rarely happens. So they will work you to the bone, and especially as a resident.
We've arrived at our final question. So tell us, in what ways do you think being a doctor has changed you as a person?
Hmm. I think I have seen a wide variety of perspectives. Yeah. Uh, different ways of thinking. And like I was saying about different ways of life people live. Um, I feel I have grown emotionally. Intelligence wise, I think it's the same, but it's kind of kept me stimulated, gives me a lot of variety at work. So I haven't lost my passion as such. I feel more of an adult. And I think that's very important to make that transition from a uni student to adult life. I think being a doctor allows you to become more of an adult. You're in high stress situations, saving lives. Um, you're in very emotional scenarios, uh, complex team dynamics. It changes day by day. It really does test you, but I think it'll be for the better. Yeah. And that's not to say if you don't survive this test that you're not worthy. Everyone feels it differently. But if you do grow from it, that's great. And I think it's an opportunity to grow.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for doing this interview. Thank you for your time.
No problem.
If you guys have any questions after this interview, feel free to write them in the comments or send me a direct message at Big Sister MD on TikTok and Instagram or on here on YouTube. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching.